Welcome back to the Lose Weight by Eating podcast. My name is Audrey Johns, and I'm so excited to introduce you to a fellow cookbook author, Kaleb Wyse. Kaleb, thank you so much for agreeing to this interview. I know you must be so busy.
No, thank you for having me. This is really fun. I love to talk, so doing things like this is always fun.
Oh, I love it. I'm so excited. And I've been geeking out over your cookbook because it's stunning. And HarperCollins let you do a hardback, which I'm a little jealous of. But what I wanted to bring to the listeners and to the viewers today is I want to give people a backstage pass of what is it like writing a cookbook. And also, when someone picks up your book, I'm sure you hear this all the time, what recipe should they try first? Which is your favorite? And, which didn't make it in the book. And so I thought that could just kind of be fun and we could chat about it.
Absolutely.
Your book, there's always room at the table. I'm holding it up for those watching on YouTube. It's filled with stunning photos and lovely stories. The recipes are fantastic. How did you decide on the theme of the book?
So I was never someone that really went into anything I'm doing thinking I'm going to for sure write a book. It wasn't really in necessarily even the back of my mind. But I started with obviously social media and having a website dedicated to recipes and videos. So I think it much more organically came out of once I got to the point of knowing I was going to write a cookbook, it was kind of, since so many of my followers had asked for it, I knew it had to somewhat parallel the things I've been sharing about and talking about. So I am someone that moved home to my family farm, fourth generation to do so. And so that story kind of begins itself. And I definitely wanted people that found this book, whether you were a follower or maybe never were and just happened to pick it up, I wanted you to feel like you were all at once, just kind of coming onto my farm, coming into my house and learning about kind of my story as we go through the food. So there's different, obviously, parts of the book, and I kind of go through different people in my life that are important, but I wanted each person to kind of get a snapshot of that and hopefully learn a little bit more about why this food is together. So the book really kind of, to me, chose itself out of what I've always been sharing, if that makes any sense, which maybe doesn't.
Love it. And I love your brand. And it's very different than mine. So if somebody's listening and because it's the Lose Weight by Eating podcast, no, we're not going to talk about weight loss food here. But, gardening is such an amazing piece of self-care. And, and I'm a cookbook author. So, sue me for wanting to interview another cookbook author.
Absolutely. No, I think gardening is such a big part of it. That's what I love.
And I love the photos of your garden and your family. And I mean, the food is it's spectacular. So anyone looking for an all natural cookbook, absolutely. This one's definitely going to be for you. What was recipe testing like for you? And did you start with a long list? That's how I do it. I give them
really?
A long list of
you have, all your recipes ready to go.
What?
And then
you had them all ready?
No, do you? Is that what you do? Do you have them all ready and then are like, okay, now I'm going to start testing?
What I do is I give them a list because with HarperCollins, they always, for each of my books, they wanted a list of all of the recipes that I was going to put in there. And they would say, okay, we're going to option 150 recipes for a cookbook. So I would give them 300 recipe ideas or just the titles. This way I could cross them off the list as they weren't working. How did that work for you? And, with the aspect of seasonality with the food, were there any issues or roadblocks that you hit?
So going into this, I think when, the editor and I were talking, I think they right away were the ones that actually much more, I think, saw it from a perspective of kind of being story driven more than I always thought, a cookbook has to be very much only about the food and it has to be very maybe like something that's never been seen before. So it really scared me to think of doing a book when I feel like a lot of my food has, nostalgic aspects, has comfort food aspects. And so I always thought, I don't know if I'll really go into it, but my editors were very much about go to it from your story, from your sense of place. So for me, since I've always been posting recipes and building a website on that, the recipes themselves were more ones that I feel like I've always kind of held back on. Either they're super nostalgic or they were ones that I kind of was like, I don't know, this might be kind of boring for me to do a video on, or I haven't ever really felt like going into it full scape. So for me, what I did was I wrote down all the recipes that to me triggered some type of memory for me. whether it was like something from growing up or something a grandparent taught me or even just talked about that maybe I never really even made a lot. So for me, that's where I kind of started with. And then I tried to say, like, how will the story of kind of the people that shaped my food kind of pattern through this? So it really wasn't, it was hard at times, but honestly, what I did first was just write off titles. So that was for me like the best way to do it, kind of like you, where I kind of just went through and was like, what is everything I want to include? And I knew I wanted to break it up in what I call like traditional like community or church cookbook style, where you have, you know, like your dinners, your side dishes, your things like that. Because again, the cookbooks I used growing up were always delineated that way. So I started with my headers like that, and then I went through and had my titles. But recipe testing in general for this, while it was pretty much the same as what I usually do for recipe testing, for this one, I grow almost all of the food. So anything that's like fresh in here is like straight from the garden. So I would try to test in kind of conjunction with knowing that also, by the way, we did all the photos in-house. So there's 2 of us here at Wyse Guide. So the photographer is always here too, which is nice. And so kind of as we went, we kind of melded everything together so we could be as seasonal. Because in my videos, I'm able to do that. So I really wanted this book to kind of be that same idea. So I was testing along with like the season pretty much, because I knew once I got to December, since we were taking the pictures, if I need something from the garden and I may not be able to get it in a grocery store, I wanted to make sure I could do that.
Yeah. And that's where I missed the bar 4 times in a row. My photography team is not here on
Right.
site.
That's hard. Yeah.
And my first cookbook had a full holiday section in it. And my food stylist had to call the store that she always uses, and she's a popular food stylist, so they know her, to get a turkey in March. Or no, I think it was June. And it was like, how do you get these things?
Yeah.
And I love that you have someone there just able to capture it. Did you style your own food as well?
Yeah, we did. Which I don't know. I mean, granted, I will say again, we post food a lot. So at first we were like, oh yeah, we can do this. We got into so many fights over this cookbook because it's a completely different, like you think like, yeah, no problem. I put food on my website, which we care a lot about and put a lot of time into. But the book felt so much more like cemented, and you wanted it to really, you know, you want it to feel natural. You want it to feel like all these things. And so I feel like it took a lot more time to do these pictures than we probably were thinking. It was also in the midst of doing a remodel on the house that I thought would be no big deal. Ended up being a 9-month thing. And so there were all the like my downstairs was like smashed together, and we were taking pictures on the dining room table as like construction workers were coming in and out. And like, I was like, no big deal. I'm just making food. But it would actually, I mean, obviously there's always going to be chaos. So no matter when you do it, there's going to be chaos. But it was, I don't think the way we work together in the fact that we do it all the time, I think is what made it so this felt much more like natural and authentic for me, especially for a first cookbook, I guess. And so I know we're lucky in that way, but yeah, it was able to kind of do it as the season progresses.
That's so great. I'm so in awe that you style your own food. I'm terrible at it. I'm terrible at it.
Well, I think we always have a critical eye of ourselves, though. Like, I don't think I would never say I, or the photographer would never say he's a food stylist either. But it's just one of those things where, I don't know. Yeah. I look at other people's and I'm always like, wow, that's so good.
You made layered bean dip look good.
Yeah, that's okay. That was like 2 times making that, by the way, or 3 for the final picture. Like the testing, that was separate. That was fine. But the final, oh my, that is a hard one to photograph because
it is a hard one.
Never looks that good.
And then here's the one that my food stylist did.
Oh, see, I love that. That's so funny. We had thought about doing a clear trifle type bowl, but then I don't know. I forget how we landed on this one.
No, but like you made it work and didn't have to pay for it.
Well, emotionally.
Well, you did. You had to pay that. Oh, man. That is so amazing. Is there another book in the works?
Yeah, there is going to be.
Mm-hmm. Good. Yeah, I'm glad to hear that.
Great. And on this, I do admit, on the next one, there may be some photography help, just because I think it's also just with everything that we like do business wise, it was a lot to fit in on top of everything else, because obviously like our day-to-day business is shooting videos, posting recipes. And so when you add in this, plus we do a self-published magazine once a year around the holidays, it was just like, you know what? I don't know emotionally if that can happen again in the house.
No, I get it. Definitely make it easier on yourself as time goes on.
Learning, you
Um,
learn a lot. And I think that's, I mean, I learned a lot in a good way.
that's awesome. Is there any piece that you were so surprised by? Like, picture another new author is listening or watching. What surprised you about the process, or what were you not expecting and were kind of thrown for a loop on?
Oh, so I'm sure this process is very different for each person. I'm sure each editor has like a different method and things. I think for me, so I probably fantasize too much, like the whole like Judith Jones, Julia Child relationship in my head.
Yeah,
If you know what I
yeah.
mean? Like whether you watch the show Julia or Julia and Julia, the movie. And so in my head, I was like, oh, okay, so this is like a super collaborative thing where like the editors are going to want to be like really involved, which scared me, but also maybe excited me to have like these like people that were just like going to be really in there. And then when we got into it, I realized, oh no, it's all like about me and my story, which is wonderful now that I've been through it and now that I know it. It just made me very like a little bit deer in headlights, I think, when I realized like, oh no, 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 no. They're not gonna like be involved. Obviously, they're not gonna come to my house and like be a part of it. But like they're not gonna like even really dissect too much. Cause like every time I'd be like, I don't know, do you think this recipe should be in here? They're like, well, do you think it should be in there? And do you think it tells your story? And I'd be like, oh, okay. So this
Yeah.
is like what so it was a it's not a bad thing at all. It was just like a oh, kind of like a light bulb moment of like, okay. So it helped me, I think, realize I have to be much more confident. Because
Yeah.
again, when you do things everything like website based like I do or whatever, you're kind of become used to this idea that while I try to and I want people to go use the recipes all the time on my website, you have to kind of work at trying to remind them to go back to a website. This is like they're going to see this in their hands and turn to it. So you want each recipe to be really intentional and very like have a reason to be in there and make it so people want to make it. So that felt then a lot more like, oh, okay, this is like a different process than I thought. But I think in the end, it was really good. It was that way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and it'll give you that confidence for book two. And I have to say, I must have watched Julie and Julia at least once a week when I
Oh,
was writing. It
so
was
good.
just it's a great movie,
So
but
good.
it just made me feel I don't know, as if I wasn't alone in the process, because it is such a solitary process. That movie makes you feel like, oh, well, they're going to help you come up with the name of the
Right.
book.
Right.
No. Oh, they're going to try the
Exactly.
recipes.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
It's
You
like,
think a lot more like it's really romanticized. And I maybe at one time, when there weren't near as many cookbooks coming out and stuff, maybe it was a lot more hands-on because it was trying to understand the beginning of really the cookbook world. But I think it's just now it's so much more on each person and really like because what I also kept realizing was like, I guess I know my audience the best, which sounds kind of odd to say. And yet you do learn about your audience, especially with social media. You learn about what they like, what they don't like, what kind of draws them to you or does. So it's like that probably is a good that in the end you are making those decisions. It's just, yeah. Or did you ever watch the show? Like like they did a show on streaming for a while, Julie. It was just called
Julie?
Julie.
Just Julie? No. Is it about
So
cookbooks too?
Julia. No, it's about no, 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 no. It's Julia Child is so so good. They only did 2 seasons. Oh my goodness, you need to watch it. It is
Yeah,
so
I do.
so good. BB Newworth is in it. Um, oh, it is so good. But it gives it at a different time in Julia's life. It's like right after she moved to Cambridge, after the cookbook came out, and when she's trying to start her show at WGBH. That you should watch too, because again, Judith Jones is such a part of that one too. But anyway, it's really good.
I love that. I love, love, love that. Um, to change, to kind of to move the bar here and to ask a question kind of out of the box, canning completely intimidates me. And I have
Really?
4 damn cookbooks and a website with thousands of recipes, and I've never done canning. And I know there's no way I can. I'm a city girl, so like,
Oh, you can do it. You can absolutely do it. Yeah,
it's
canning is
so
easy.
intimidating. Do you have any tips for me and anyone else listening who's just terrified of it?
Well, I think preserving in general, if you've never done any type, obviously the first thing to always think of is quick pickles or anything, which I know you've done. Like, I just
Yes.
know you have.
Yes.
That always gets you that first thing of like, okay, it's really the same process. The only difference in canning is you're going to make it shelf stable. So the best thing to start with is anything that's high sugar or high vinegar. So any of your jams, in any of your like pour over pickles. So we're not talking about a fermented pickle. We're talking about one that has a brine of vinegar poured over the top of like cucumbers or whatever you want to actually pickle. And then because both of those are super food safe, easy. So as opposed to things that are like acidity levels change, so green beans, even tomatoes, those take a long time. You have to worry about making sure you have like citric acid in them and things like that. With things like vinegar or sugar, you don't. So we're talking like a 10-minute water bath time with your in your jars with an easy brine. Like for things like me, all I follow usually on all my recipes is I make sure they're like adaptions or are compared to the USDA, because the USDA puts out guidelines for canning. And so, because elevation changes, like you may have a slightly different elevation. I don't
I
know
think I
if you
do.
do,
Yeah.
but that always changes your cooking or your water bathing time a little bit. So you'll go
Hmm.
up a little bit higher if you're higher up, things like that. But go with anything that's like a high vinegar, high sugar. You really, there is no, like the old movies where they'll show you like the lids pop off.
Yeah. That's why I'm terrified.
Okay. That is like to me such, now I'm not saying that can't happen, but if you're doing things like jams and vinegar, like that is such a uncommon thing, because it just, the high like things you're putting in them of the vinegar, of the sugar, makes it super safe and easy to can. And they literally only take like 10 minutes once they're in there. Some people still don't even water bath their things like jam. I would always say make sure to water bath it at least 10 minutes. Some people just put it on a hot lid because it has that high sugar and that heat will suck out the air. I would never do that. I would always follow USDA.
Right. Oh, yeah, definitely. You don't want to be getting sick or making people that you love that you're giving this away to sick. All right. Well, maybe I'll have to try. I've definitely done pickles, and I've done, I have a 30-minute pickled onion recipe that I do for like tacos or whatever. So yeah, maybe that might be I'm looking for new hobbies, and this may be
Such a,
it.
it sounds hard, but I think the thing is we think of like our grandmas doing it and doing like, 20, 30 plus quart of something, and it feels overwhelming. But when you think of it of doing something small batch, like maybe one batch of jam will give you 6 1 cup jars, like that, really that process is not super time consuming. You don't have to get buckets and buckets of fruit ready, and you can put it together really quickly. One, it's wonderful gifts. So even if you're thinking 6 jars is too much, which, okay, jam, that is not too much. But if you are, that is like an easy thing then to gift. And like, it's such a beautiful gift too.
Oh, absolutely. I do love my jam, and I did go on your website before we jumped on, because as much as I want to promote your cookbook, I also want to promote your website, and you've got all the rhubarb stuff happening
Wow.
on there.
Love rhubarb.
Oh,
Do you not have rhubarb?
we do. I personally don't. I live in a brownstone, so I don't have, like a backyard in
Yeah.
which I can do
Right.
anything.
Right.
But yes, we definitely, rhubarb does grow here.
So here in Iowa, I would say if you live on any type of farmstead or old farmstead, you're always going to have an old patch of rhubarb. And it would have been planted possibly by someone like ages and ages ago. Like mine actually was here. I think my grandma or someone put it in way long ago. And it's the best thing because you do nothing to it. It just sits and lives year to year. But also, it's the most odd. I always think it's funny because, yes, it's super, super tart. Even if you get like a Canada Red variety that's red, it has a little bit more sweetness to it. But you definitely usually always want to do something more in the baking realm with it. But what's fun anymore, and I don't have any recipes on my website for this, but a lot of people are starting to play with it in savory applications, like kind of think like barbecue sauces where you can go that tangy, sour type route. I think that's really fun. I haven't played too much with that, but I have roasted it and used it in a slightly more savory kind of like way a few times. But it's really fun. I just love anything that to me can like be set and forget. So like that and asparagus are like my two favorite things in the garden.
Love it. What do you typically do with asparagus when it's in season? I mean, we've got our typical, roast the asparagus. Give us some new ideas.
Well, I do pickle it. I do.
Yes.
I will literally pickle anything. I do like to pickle it because that's just, I really think it's delicious. I will do the roasting. In the cookbook, I do have a recipe that does, it roasts it, but then it puts it on top of a toast that has like a whipped goat cheese with fresh dill and then an egg on top of it. So you can kind of, growing up, how we always had it was a creamed asparagus on toast, which it looks gross, but it's actually to me very delicious. But the one in the cookbook is a little bit more of a fresher, deconstructed take on that. So instead of hard boiled eggs that were mixed in like growing up, this has just kind of a nice egg on top with kind of that runny yolk that you can just like go through and get all that roasted asparagus with each. I love asparagus. I'll make quiche with it a lot. Like I will
Yes.
always put it in my quiche. Um, and then I'll also sometimes put it in like different like casseroles if I'm going to do a casserole. But honestly, on a weeknight basis, I'm much more of like a saute or a roast, whatever I have in the garden, and putting it on some type of salad. So as opposed to making just a side, I put any roasted veg right on top of the salad and then put some type of protein with it usually.
I love a hot and cold salad like that where you've got the hot roasted veggies. Yeah. And I even have a recipe for tacos made with
Oh,
asparagus.
that's fun.
Highly recommend. Really fun because it's got such a great like a great texture that
Oh, it
it's so
does.
great in
Make
a
that
flour
seasoning
rich
on
tortilla.
them and roast them and then make the talk about it. Oh, I like that.
Highly
I'm gonna have
recommend.
to try that. I love that idea.
I love that I'm giving you ideas as well. This is so
No, I love that.
to get back to your storytelling in the cookbook. For me, and I'm like a Nigella Lawson super fan.
Oh, me too. Yeah.
So for me, a cookbook is a great cookbook is just as good as like I want to use this as a coffee table book. Like that's how
Oh,
I want my cookbooks to be used personally, and the cookbooks that I purchase, I want them to be so beautiful and to tell a story and not just be mix this into that.
I love that.
So that people will want to, enjoy them and read them like a book. And I love that yours reads like a book and it tells your story. And I love even the little vignettes about, talking about, your grandmother. And
I think it's funny. I would have never said I was a writer. I would have never like thought I'm someone that like wants to write a lot. I'm usually someone that likes to talk, honestly. So that's why we've always done more like video based things because I like to explain and I like to use my hands and I like to verbalize everything. I think with the book, when I actually sat down to start, doing the words on it, I realized that there was like so many important aspects that maybe it was even for me just wanting to get it out, but like it kind of became this love letter to my family, which I'll admit, I'm someone too that hasn't always read through every cookbook. I think we all buy cookbooks for different reasons. There are some I buy because they're, obviously behind me is like I have a lot of cookbooks. Sometimes I buy them because, they're obviously, different cuisine from around the world. There's something I want to try. There's something unique. I think with this, I knew going into it that my food wasn't reinventing the wheel necessarily. It was definitely modernizing. It was getting it being fresher, kind of bringing flavors forward or just increasing them. But it also to me was important to note that like I had kind of always felt almost bad about my food because it felt so just like Iowa Farm. Like it was nothing I ever thought that was like worth talking about. And I think when I was writing, I was able to kind of express why and then even tell myself why it really was important and is important still to have these foods that can be important to us even if they don't feel like you're kind of making something out of nothing, if that makes sense. Like sometimes I see recipes anymore and I'll just be like, I would have never, like the title seems so bizarre, like brothy something with this and that on it, and you're like, that just doesn't even sound like anything, but it's kind of sounds original, where I knew mine weren't going to be like that. So I think the words helped me kind of connect why they're important and why they are still relevant and kind of worth making.
yeah, no, that brings up another question because you have a website, I have a website,
Right.
SEO. So, right? So
Yeah.
those who don't understand, SEO is search engine optimization, and it's a mother effer.
Uh-huh.
Anyways, I loved writing the cookbooks because I could call the recipes
Yeah.
what I wanted to call
I
them
yeah.
instead of what Google wanted me to call them.
Yeah.
So tell us about that. Is there anything any funny names or quirky things that you put in here that you knew you couldn't because of SEO in a
Right.
website?
Well, I think the thing like granola. If you go to the granola in the breakfast section, I have my book right here. And by the way, I will say SEO is still a learning experience. I'm not someone that like knows everything about SEO, and I would say every day I'm still learning things that I hate or don't. I put almost healthy granola. That would be very much not probably user intention on like Google or going to your website. But I liked kind of what I wrote about why I called it that. And I liked calling it that because to me, that was with the website. I think when I started years ago, I did kind of title things whatever I wanted and nothing was ever found. And nothing, I don't think it really had good, like if people would come, it wasn't necessarily what they thought because the title would be off from what they were searching, maybe, which is what kind of user intention is. And so eventually over time, you start learning that. And it takes a little bit of the fun out of what you think your creativity is in like recipe naming, or even sometimes what your recipes are going to be. It kind of just changes what you adapt for more what website uses as opposed to just like your heart. And so this book, or any book in general, you're able to kind of bring back your full personality and say things like it literally. I remember we got to the point, actually, it's funny, talking about the titles. And I was like, okay, so what do we need to, like, what are you going to have me change about the titles? They're like, oh, no, I mean, the titles are fine if you want to call them that. And I was like, oh, real? I thought we'd have to go through each one by one, have this like long discussion about like why yes or why not. And they're like, oh, no, they can be titled. And then I was like, oh, okay. Like, that was a night, like, just because you sometimes feel boxed in on other, foods, like you can't just kind of get too wordy, and it has to be very much like what exact someone's going to search. Yeah, like you were saying, what they're going to search. And so like in here, I could call something, that it was inspired by like Grandma Hershey's egg noodles, where I would never put that on the website. I'd put it like in the words that most likely no one will read. I can't put it as the title. So it was really fun actually to be able to title these exactly kind of like what they meant to me.
Yeah. I think I have in my second book, I think I have one called Chips and Salsa and Guac Oh My.
I love
And
that.
and
Yeah.
I'm totally wearing a Dorothy dress in the picture with like a little basket. I totally went nerdy on that one. I
Why
was like,
not
yes, we're
though?
doing Wizard of Oz.
Yeah, you should. Like that's the thing. I don't think going into it I knew it could be quite like that, but like that's kind of a fun part of it is it's such a different thing than like your website or your daily just kind of work. So at least there's like fun components as opposed to just all the work that goes into it. You have these moments of like, oh, that's nice.
And I do have to say, as somebody who runs a healthy website, this is not almost healthy granola. This is straight up healthy granola.
That's good.
I think you did a
I'm someone, I will admit, overall, I will usually healthify most recipes in daily life. And actually, I will always say in this cookbook, while moderation on anything I'm fine with, there's a lot of recipes in here, like the salad section. Like usually growing up, salads in the Midwest are like those cold, Cool Whippy, sherbet, jello, things like that. The salads in here are actually very delicious, fresh salads that use the greens from the garden, have really good dressings. And so I tried to kind of on everything make it also what I want to eat all the time, because you just feel good when it not only tastes good, but makes you feel good. So a lot of the side dishes and salads, and even a lot of the main dishes, are ones that are really kind of like healthy on their own.
agreed. It's a very all in, I would say, very healthy cookbook. It's all natural, which is all that I genuinely care about. If you're trying to lose weight, it's one thing, but maintenance, this is a great maintenance book because it's not going to just be junk food. Highly, highly recommend. Yeah, and I love that you're, with the SEO.
Oh my
I'm just
gosh. It's such like, and it's annoying how it changes then too. Like, it's not just, which, I mean, granted, I think it took me years to understand this, but I think a lot of people, what they don't realize is every time you go to a website and you hear people complain, I don't want all the stuff, I just want the recipe. It's like, granted, I get that, but like that stuff is the SEO part. And that's the only way you can actually try to like make it and be seen by people. Because while I want my audience to go there all the time, I also want other people to maybe find it and hopefully
yeah.
find recipes they'll use. And you just don't have a chance if you don't follow any of that.
No, I totally agree. Although I did read an article over a year ago where I can't remember the name of the guy, but he's the search liaison for Google, had said, "Oh, that's going to go away. Like just give the readers what they want." And so
Yes, I did hear that. Yeah.
yeah, so I went through and scraped my entire website, and it is yet to happen. So now I'm like,
We're going
I'm
to start
holding
taking stuff away.
yeah, I took everything away that I possibly could. So now all it is just a quick intro, why this recipe is great, a photo, a list of the ingredients, how
Yeah.
to meal prep it, and the recipe. And I'm like,
Wow.
all right, Google, I'm waiting. This is what you
Right?
told me you wanted, and I'm
No.
losing money.
I was going to say, it's so scary to change anything. That's the hard part. What's actually the scariest part is like things with AI that I'm like, like this morning I was watching a morning show, and this is, sorry, completely off subject, but I was watching a morning show and they were talking about like great new like techie apps or things to use. And the host was saying like, oh, look, this is my favorite one. And she took her phone and took a picture of like ingredients she had. And she's like, okay, load this picture into Chat GPT. Yeah, no, I said that right. And then just tell it you want to make a meal out of it. And then it did. It just like gives you a recipe, like preheat the oven, get out this, which all it's doing is scraping all these recipes from all of our sites and it somehow is able to morph them into a recipe. So I get that, like, it looks legit. You have no idea how it will be, but it's also taking the person completely out of it. And I'm like, oh, that's, I guess, how this will happen. Like, I never quite was like thinking, and I was like,
Yeah,
oh,
I
that's
know. It's scary, this whole AI thing. I know I've seen a downtick on my traffic. I'm sure you have as well. Personally, I would never trust AI to give me a recipe because they're looking at it like a math equation almost. Like if
right.
you add this plus this
Yeah,
plus this will work out.
right,
Will it cook and hold together? Yes. But can a computer really tell you if it's going to taste good?
right,
No.
right,
So, but I think that is, it's just a matter of time. And there is a new piece that I noticed today in the news on SEO where they're going to start giving links. And so it might be like, I want to find a great healthy salad. And it might be like, hey, check out Caleb's website.
right,
Okay, now
right,
check out Audrey's website. And so it might
right.
be more like that. And that would be great for a
Yeah,
lot of
yeah.
people, including the user. But yeah, AI is getting a little interesting.
It is. And it's hard because, like, I think we all probably have ways in our lives that we're like, oh, that'd be nice. But then you kind of forget what that means for other people. But you also forget that, like, that takes this, like, human connection component out of it. Like, it takes this person behind the scenes that, like, worked hard, and who, I mean, come on, who are you going to complain to when you don't like the recipe? You can't
Yeah,
complain to AI.
exactly.
You can
Exactly.
leave a comment online.
They're not giving you a comment section or how many stars. And
Right.
yeah, good
Yeah.
call on that one. All right. Well, I can bitch about AI and SEO all day, as I'm sure you can as well. I'm sure some of the listeners are like, okay, can we please get back to the cookbooks? As you're writing the book, what do you hope that readers will take away? And, what practical tips or skills will they, do you want them to learn from your book, or are you hoping they will learn from your book?
I think I hope that people can take away that sometimes, and it depends, each of us is different on this, but sometimes that, like, nostalgic memory of food can be just as relevant today as it was. Like, not, I think we sometimes view certain food as, like, outdating eventually, and maybe that's just because I'm in the food world too. But you feel like there's trends, you feel like there's, kind of like hipper things or like new people coming in. And I think it's easy to then want to adapt and think like, oh, okay, this is what everyone's doing. But I think what this, like, book hopefully shows is, like, everything can kind of always be reinvented, even if it uses some of those same components and memories. And I think that's what I love about so much of this food is, even for me when I was doing it, there was some that I would start with and be like, oh, I don't know if I really want to do this. Then I'd play with the recipe, I'd work with it and be like, you know what, this is actually really good, or it works to be a great weeknight meal, which I love, or it's not just kind of like a dump and stir. It actually has levels of flavor. Because a lot of it, some of these foods when I was growing up, we maybe would use a canned soup in certain things or do things like that. So I would work on that and be like, well, how can you get kind of that same type of quickness, hopefully, or close to the same, but still kind of have your own thing with it and kind of have it be homemade, but also really delicious. And so I think that's what I hope people take from this is that food doesn't have to be overly complicated. You don't have to always, which I love, by the way, complicated food. I love going to your grocery store and searching for new ingredients. But what I love in this cookbook is it's all really simple things that a lot of it you could have at home. If not, I live in a very rural area in Iowa, and at either grocery store I can go to within about 20 miles of my house, they're going to have all these ingredients. So it's not ones you have to search for or order or specialty, which are fun, but this food is like very much just one you can make.
It's very practical, and I love that. Is there a favorite recipe? Like if somebody's picking up your book and they're like, okay, what do I make first? What do you recommend?
Ugh.
No
if we
pressure.
if we want something, it's hard because there's like I can make like a case for like each one. If we want something that screams, like, if you're not used to the Midwest or haven't been to Iowa, and again, this is not a healthy one, but if you are thinking of something you want a flavor of Iowa, the pork tenderloin is such a funny story if like you read through it, but it's also such a harbinger of Iowa. Like, it is something that is so Iowa, and I really kind of changed it up where I made sure I kind of did a little bit of a dry brine, like a salt on the actual tenderloin. I added some seasoning in. But what's really fun too, you could play with that. Instead of having like a bun, you could put, just like you would with like a chicken cutlet, you could put a great salad on top of it and kind of make that great play with it, which I would love. I just think that one has such a good kind of an Iowa aspect to it that I really love. But on top of that, I actually, one of my favorite salads is the tossed but untossed salad, it's called. Because in Iowa, I found out we have a lot of weird names that are really just what other people call other. So like in Iowa, I always had what's called untossed salad, which is just apparently 7-layer salad for everyone else. Do you know what 7-layer salad is?
Heard of either of them, but
Yeah.
I'm just a big messy salad.
It's a Midwest salad that growing up was just like a hunk of iceberg lettuce chopped up, put into a square Tupperware keeper usually, with peas, bacon, onion, and then you take, no joke, straight mayonnaise, and you just put a thick layer on top of that, and then you put, I think it was Swiss cheese. Now, growing up, I loved this. We had it like maybe at like special occasion, like at like Christmas or something, or I don't know, holidays. But then like at some point, you're like, this is a really weird, like
Yeah.
a really weird version. So I took components of that and made like a really good homemade buttermilk ranch dressing with a lot of herbs. And but I have peas in it. I have some chopped bacon, but made a great seed and nut kind of topping for it. Goat cheese on top of really good greens. And so like it gives me the same, actually to me it's better, but it gives me those same kind of flavors and nostalgic vibe, but in a way that like completely updates it too. And I really, I don't know, I love that.
It's an upgraded version, a little bit what I would call a grown-up version. Not that, grown-ups don't eat their
Right.
but
Right.
yeah, I love that. I love how you made the buttermilk instead of the traditional mayonnaise. And
Yeah.
anyone listening, you could certainly scrape his buttermilk ranch recipe and just use my Greek yogurt and make
Oh,
it low
yeah.
calorie.
They do have a little bit of Greek yogurt in there, by the way. I do. I
Nice.
cut always my mayonnaise. Anything that has mayonnaise, I usually cut with some Greek yogurt.
See, I knew we were, perfect first cookbook author to have on, because I feel exactly the same way. From your perspective, what is the biggest difference between the realities of farm to table cooking and the idealized versions we often see in media?
Both with the book and like without. I think it's a really interesting thing because farm to table is just very obviously like hot. It's a great kind of brand. It has really good marketing right now.
It's great for SEO.
It really is. And I think it's interesting because I think there's two versions of it. There's the farmer's market version, which is great, and I love it. And there's the at-home version where people actually maybe do kind of grow it. I think the version we see in our mind is where someone has these beautiful manicured raised beds in their backyard, and we think it's super easy. And I have big, beautiful raised beds. I do have a lot of them, and they are not easy. They are a lot of work. There are a lot of pest issues. I am out there hours every day, both in my yard and in the garden, taking care of this stuff. And it is not something that is just like, no big deal. You plant it and come inside and go get it whenever you want it. No, you're going to have awful years. You're going to have certain things that are wins, certain things that are losses. I think the biggest thing you have to be is you can't go in with expectations of thinking, I'm going to get this, this, and know how to cook with it. Instead, you have to be like, I'm going to see what the season gives me, and you're going to have to adapt your kind of way you use your kitchen around that. There are years where my radishes and spinach do amazing. There are years where spinach does bad, and you're going to have to change to a different green. There are certain things you always know do well. Swiss chard is always easy, and bugs don't really love it, so that one's an easy one. But there are years where your cab is just as big and beautiful, and there are years where it's smaller and you're not going to have as much. So you really have to kind of go into it without the expectations of the movie of having these big harvest baskets always full, and no, it's going to be kind of a learning experience. I'm still learning. I've been gardening my whole life, and every time it's a little bit different. And the foods I then prepare, whether it's for myself or for the website, whatever they are going to also be different around that, because I think we have this idea that there's perfection in farm to table, and there isn't. You're going to have wins and losses, and it's going to have pests, and you're going to have holes in leaves, but you still use them. You wash them, and then your kale might have some little holes in them, and that's okay. You don't have to throw out what doesn't look perfect. We're used to perfect produce from a grocery store. That's not going to be in your garden, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And thank you for saying that too, because I think so many people are so hyper focused on, oh, there's bugs in it, or oh, there's dirt on it. Wash it off.
Right.
My
Absolutely.
daughter, I have a teenage daughter. She'll be cooking something in the kitchen. She'll drop a piece of produce on the floor and go to throw it away.
Oh, no. Yeah.
Wash it. Just wash it, kiddo.
In general, that's what we're so, a lot of times, grocery stores throw out a lot of produce, especially like the big box grocery stores, because if it doesn't meet certain specifications, they've been training us almost like not to buy it. And then the problem is that's what we think we need in a garden. And it's like, oh, it's so hard to get perfect produce. You have to have pretty much a gardener that's out there separating. Like when I plant carrots, I sprinkle them in a row and I should go out and pluck out so there's not too many. I don't do that because I just don't have time. So instead, when they grow, they can be gnarled and too close together, and you're going to have different sized carrots. That's just how it is. So they're not going to be those perfect individual ones, but I grew them and they're wonderful and they have better, anything will have better flavor if you grow it.
100%. And your kids are more likely to eat it if they grow it and or cook it.
Yeah.
So
No,
I do wish I had room for a garden. I'm not at all saying I have a green thumb, but that would be something one of these days when I'm no longer a city girl.
Not to put just a container so you can do greens at least.
I want to do, at the very least, you see those, you put them on your counter or in your kitchen window. Yeah. That's about as much room as I have at this time. And I'm okay with that. There are definitely community gardens. I need to get out there.
That's nice. Yeah. That'd be fun.
I, like I said earlier, I'm looking for new hobbies, and you're inspiring me. Thank you, Kaleb.
It's fun though too to utilize. Like if you have, I'm sure you have good farmers markets and stuff, and that's great too, because then you're at least not only helping someone, but you're also usually knowing how it's growing, which is kind of nice.
Absolutely. And I love how you mentioned how it's helping someone. It's so important to help the local economy and not just make it about, okay, where's the cheapest?
Right.
If you're on a budget, I completely understand. But anytime you can buy from a local farmer or from a local small business, you're giving that back to your own community. And, whether you're just trying to be a good person or whether you believe in the law of attraction, it's good for you no matter what.
I agree with that. I think it does. And it makes a huge difference because usually someone that grows it, especially depending on certain farmers markets, they really care about it.
Yes.
And they care about how it's going to be used and things like that. So I love that.
And I love going to the farmers markets and asking questions of the farmers. I mean, obviously I know how to cook, but if it's a new piece of produce or if I'm like, I've been using carrots the same way, do you have any other ideas for me? They always do. And they're always so enthusiastic. So highly, highly recommend. If you're not as lucky as Kaleb to have your own, backyard or full blown farm, I should say, and you're like me, just in a little brownstone with no dirt in which to plant anything, you can certainly go out there and chat it up with the farmers and bring your money to the local businesses. Now that your book is out in the world, what are you working on next, and what's next for Wyse Guide and all of that?
It's always a funny question because I feel like that makes me feel like I should be really goal oriented. And I think sometimes when you do this, I don't always have the best like far out goals because like everything that has happened, I feel like over the years was never something I necessarily planned for or could have planned for. Like even the cookbook, I wasn't necessarily looking for one, but the way kind of the stars aligned, it worked out well. And then now that it's, it's kind of funny when you first start the cookbook, you think like, this is it. This is like my like, not that you're like one and done, but you kind of just think like, okay, this is the pinnacle. And then you kind of get to the point, like process of writing it and realize, nope, this is just part of that game. And this is kind of like that beginning step more. Like it opens up almost this new chapter, which is, I did not even mean that to be a pun, but it kind of creates this new path a little bit. So I feel like at the moment, like we obviously always have a lot of just like our normal day to day, which is, we just got done today. I filmed 2 videos, and so that'll be 2 different posts on the website. I do a lot of outdoor garden videos too. So I'm really seasonal, kind of on going back and forth with those. But then we, like I said, once a year publish a self-published magazine that our followers purchase. And it's always around the holidays. So it's full of Christmas decorating and Christmas recipes that we do a lot of. And so that already I've been working on and getting those recipes ready, and we'll kind of photograph those here soon, hopefully, just because otherwise all at once a year somehow just flies by. But then, yeah, I'm really open to kind of whatever comes my way and seeing how it works out. But my years are usually pretty full.
I love that. And I love that you gave me a little bit of pushback too, because as I said it, I listened to another podcast and this gal on it, she's like, every time I do an interview, and here I am doing it. So what's next?
Pushback. It wasn't pushback.
No, I take it as a positive, saying that, so what's next? It almost sounds as if I'm saying, well, what are you working on now? Or, you have to keep trying to one up yourself when I think it's so important just to say, I've got this great brand and whatever comes, comes. And I love that. So definitely that wasn't any kind of
I did
negative
not
feedback. That was a
take
thank
it.
you for shutting me up.
No, I did not take it like that at all. I think it's one of those things where I think social media in general is probably a chip on my shoulder with social media because you kind of feel like it's the content monster you always hear, and you kind of feel I don't like the idea of things being like one and done. It's like reels in general, when things kind of switch to reels, you feel like they're so throwaway. You do something that you feel is really good and it either does well or doesn't do well, but then it's just gone. It's just like, oh, it's gone. And so I hate that idea. And so I think in general, I'm like, oh, well, I don't always probably think as like long term as like some people maybe, but also it's weird because whether it's social media, tech, websites, online, it's all so changing all the time that you kind of never know, but you're constantly adapting. And so it kind of just feels like you're always kind of on your toes a little bit, trying to like look ahead, but not like 5 years ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. Is there anything on that plate of your work right now that you wish you could delegate, like be it social media or SEO, or is there anything? I know that this was not one of my listed questions, but have to ask.
That's a good question. I mean, there's always yes things I would definitely be willing. The day-to-day kind of minutia stuff I'm not good at, whether it's emailing people back or I get emails from like we do newsletters and things like that and people emailing back. It's over, or comments even back on social media or messages. That is the small stuff like that. I wish I was really good, but you just don't have enough time in your day, especially when I'm like the one like I do all my own yard work, I do all my own garden work. And so all that kind of just adds up to be a lot of time. And so anything that would take away, I guess, some of those small things that I don't do good at or feel like guilty that I'm not getting done. So like those like replying to a lot of people, that'd be nice. Or even like certain scheduling things, just to have someone be able to do that. But I also kind of live in the middle of nowhere and that's kind of a hard thing too. So
Maybe the new AI assistant stuff they're talking about.
right.
Since we've cursed AI, let's now use it for our own benefit.
Right, I guess use it while we can. I'm also, it's funny as I do this, I'm not that techie, so like I'm not
Really?
just like that like good at like setting everything up like that.
Well, I would say if you know what SEO is, you're probably more techie than 99% of people out there. So I would say give yourself some credit. I feel like tech's always changing. So no one ever feels confident in saying, I know what I'm doing, because
Exactly right.
every single day, I don't know if you follow Search Engine Roundtable, but I check that every single day while I'm drinking my coffee. I go on Search Engine Roundtable and I read about the new SEO news. So highly recommend that
Oh,
one. Yeah.
interesting. Search Engine Roundtable.
I'll email it to you if you
Okay,
like.
yeah, that's awesome.
But yeah.
Yeah, I haven't. Why not get nervous
So
about something else?
now that my voice is giving out and you've had a very, very busy day, I don't want to take up more than an hour with you. Could you give us a rundown of where we can find you, where we can buy your book, where we can watch you if you're doing any fun, promotional stuff right now? Like, let's tell everyone, where can you find Kaleb right now?
So I'm pretty easy. All social media channels and my website is Wyse Guide. So WYSEGUIDE. Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. My website is all that, which is kind of easy to remember. And then most of my current book events are over. I'll have one coming up or two coming up in April, but they'll be kind of like far away. One in California, that one's sold out, sadly. And then one will be coming up in Atlanta, or outside of Atlanta, that you can stay tuned to me for too. But otherwise I'm on Instagram and Facebook a lot, doing daily stories and kind of keeping up with everything I'm doing out in the garden or kind of in the house too. So I try to be on there quite a bit.
Love it so much. Kaleb, you are such a busy, busy author, and I can't thank you enough for taking this time to geek out on cookbooks and writing about food and all of that. Thank you so, so much
This
for
was a
carving out some
pleasure.
time.
I really appreciate you having me on. Thank you.
No, thank you. And do you want to give us a little hint on any theme for the next book, or do we not have a theme yet?
It's going to be a lot more about the garden.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. All right. We got to tease them enough. Let's not say anything else for now. Well, thank you so much, Kaleb. Everyone, please check out. There's always room at the table. You can get it everywhere books are sold. Yes.
Yes.
And you can also check out the HarperCollins website. It's there, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, everywhere. Get the book, get the book. Thank you again, Kaleb. And thank you to everyone listening to the Lose Weight by Eating podcast. Stay tuned to the next episode. Bye.